Hello and welcome to OSHA Focal Points. I'm Sam Gallardo. I serve as the director of the PA OSHA Consultation Program. We are part of the world-renowned Safety Sciences program at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Each day, I receive notification from OSHA in Washington about every workplace fatality and catastrophic event that occurred the previous day. Workers involved in those incidents are no different than you. They all went to work, but they never went home. They never had a chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. In many cases, they did not follow the rules, regulations, and guidance designed to protect them. Our goal in providing OSHA Focal Points is threefold. First, to educate employees and employers on the top 25 areas that OSHA has identified during inspections. Second, is to supplement OSHA training that employers must provide to their employees. Third, and most important, is to help employees work safely and go home each day to enjoy the fruits of their labor. We hope that you learn and follow these important OSHA focal points. Have a safe day.
Today's topic is confined spaces in general industry. The purpose of today's topic is to provide you with the essential need-to-know information about the hazards associated with confined spaces in general industry. During this short presentation, we will briefly discuss the following topics, which include: what is a confined space? What is a permit-required confined space? What are the common hazards associated with permit spaces? And how can you protect yourself while working inside of a permit space? So what is a confined space? A confined space is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter. It has limited or restricted means for entry and exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. A confined space must have all three. Here are pictures of common confined spaces in general industry. So what's the difference between a permit space and a confined space? A permit-required confined space is a confined space containing one or more of the following: a hazardous atmosphere or potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, and/or material that has the potential for engulfing an entrant, and/or an internal configuration that an entrant could be trapped or asphyxiated by inwardly converging walls or by a floor which slopes downward and tapers to a smaller cross-section, and/or any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. Our testing protocol. Before an employee enters a confined space, internal atmosphere shall be tested with a calibrated direct reading instrument for the following conditions in this order: oxygen, flammable gases and vapors, and potential toxic air contaminants. We need to test the atmosphere at all levels of the confined space. Just because we have good air at the opening, it doesn't mean we have good air at the bottom of the space. Common hazards associated with permit spaces include oxygen deficiency, flammable and combustible gases and vapors, toxic gases and vapors, engulfments in a solid or a liquid, high noise levels, grinding, crushing, or mixing mechanisms, configurations, extreme temperatures, chemicals, or a lack of lighting. If any of these hazards can't be eliminated, then a permit must be issued. Additional concerns with confined spaces include noise, which could be amplified due to the acoustics of the space, slippery or wet surfaces inside the confined space, increasing the risk of falls or electrical shock. We need to use all our personal protective equipment, such as hard hat, hard-toe boots, safety glasses, face shield, gloves, or overalls to protect ourselves while working inside these confined spaces. And hot work. So how can you protect yourself inside a permit-required confined space? Here's an example of a common confined space found in the workplace. The atmosphere inside of a confined space may not be suitable for entry, requiring forced air ventilation. Some confined spaces may contain mixing or crushing mechanisms that require lockout and tagout to isolate them. Adequate illumination should be provided where lighting is limited inside of a confined space. There may be an occasion where an explosion-proof lighting might be necessary. If you're an authorized entrant in a permit-required confined space, you need to know the hazards that may be faced during entry, including the mode, signs, and symptoms and consequences of exposure. You need to properly use all the equipment provided to you, and you need to communicate with the attendant outside the confined space as necessary to ensure the attendant is able to monitor your status. You need to alert the attendant outside the permit space whenever you recognize any warning sign or symptom of exposure to a dangerous situation. you detect a prohibited condition, or the attendant alerts you to exit the space. An authorized entrant must exit from the permit space anytime an order to evacuate is given by the attendant or the entry supervisor. At any time the entrant recognizes any warning sign or symptom of exposure to a dangerous situation, anytime that the entrant detects a prohibited condition, or the evacuation alarm is sounded. The attendant outside of the permit-required confined space needs to know the hazards of that particular space. Maintain an accurate head count of everybody who is working inside that confined space. The attendant must remain outside that space until relieved by another attendant. The outside attendant must maintain regular communication with the authorized entrant and also monitor conditions inside and outside of the permit space. The attendant will summon rescue services when needed and ensures that any unauthorized personnel never enter that permit space or affect operations in any way. The attendant is responsible to perform non-entry rescues and perform no other duties that might interfere with the primary responsibility to monitor and protect the authorized entrants inside a permit-required confined space. If it's possible for a worker to be overcome by a sudden change in atmospheric conditions, then a rescue procedure needs to be in place in case an entrant needs assistance in exiting from a permit-required confined space. This reserve pit is an example of a permit-required confined space because its potential to contain both a hazardous atmosphere and to engulf or drown a worker. You may act as an entry supervisor, and if that is your responsibility, you need to know the hazards that may be faced during entry, including the signs and symptoms and consequences of exposure. You need to verify by checking that all appropriate entries have been made on the permit, that all tests specified by the permit have been conducted, and all procedures and equipment specified by the permit are in place before endorsing the permit and allowing entry to begin. Lastly, the entry supervisor will terminate entry and cancel the permit when the work inside that space is complete. To help protect the authorized entrants inside of a confined space, the entry supervisor verifies that rescue services are available and the means to summon them, such as a cell phone or a telephone landline, are operable. The entry supervisor removes unauthorized individuals who attempt to enter the permit space during entry operations. And the entry supervisor determines whenever responsibility for permit space is transferred, whether it's shift changes or at the end of the day, that entry operations remain consistent with the terms of the written permit itself. So your employer is responsible for providing atmospheric testing equipment, providing ventilation equipment and/or respiratory protection, providing any training on confined space permits and the written program, developing and training emergency action and rescue plans, and responding to and correcting any hazards pointed out by you, the authorized entrant. What does safe entry mean? Safe entry means testing the atmosphere before entering, periodically monitoring the atmosphere for any potential changes, always following specific permit entry procedures, ensuring that there is at least one authorized attendant present at all times outside the permit space, correcting the hazards that you are able to correct, and reporting to your supervisor the hazards you're unable to correct. To get more help with permit spaces in general industry, go to OSHA.gov. Thank you.